All right.
Now we've got people from the,
Yeah. For the record, you want to make it clear, we'll keep you recording of both. For the record, you want to make it clear on the recording that we post the other one.
so folks, for everybody that's just joining us, we apparently, some of us like me are technical Luddites, and we were using the wrong account, which is why you couldn't get in earlier. So we apologize for that. And now you should be able to get in. Let me see if Lauren can get in now.
Lauren's in.
Lauren's in?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just glad to know that it's you that's a Luddite, not me.
Sorry about that, folks.
It's all
What
right.
do you want to?
We can circle back to my
Yeah,
discussion.
let's go with you, Lauren, now that we have you here. And Lauren, just to let you know, that one of the reasons why we're calling you so early is that Josh and Mariah weren't here at the first. They were gonna.
Mariah is here.
Are they here?
Mariah's here.
That'll
Yeah.
explain.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you both very much. For
So I can wait then, Donnie, because if they were on before me, you can just
Yes,
go
that's
ahead
right.
and then I'll get home and I'll get situated on the computer and I'll be able to be more coherent.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I apologize to everybody for this confusion. So Mariah, hello, would you talk to us, please, about Rural Economic Development Initiative and the grant?
Absolutely, would love to. And thank you all for having me here. And it was great to meet Lauren briefly last week at the village meetup in Reading. That was awesome. But I'm actually curious, the screen's a little small for you guys. So I was just curious if you all could just introduce yourselves real quick so I know who I'm on the call with.
Why don't we start down with your end, Liz?
My name's Liz Brault. I'm Kirsty Grant.
John Hostert.
Vicki McDonald.
I'm Donnie Osmond.
I'm Rick Burrows.
And I'm Jared Birchmore. And then we have 3 committee members that aren't able to be here today.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Great to meet you. And hopefully you can see me okay on your screens too. So my name is Brian Oth. I work with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which folks know the acronym VHCB, sometimes more than the full title. So the organization does a variety of incredible work around the state. And maybe you folks might be familiar with some of my colleagues in the housing program, Elise Greaves, and then maybe Jenny Hislop. And I know that there have been some initial conversations with some folks on that team maybe a couple months back around like the housing aspect of this project as well. So happy to just keep everybody looped in with my other colleagues at VHCB as well. But yeah, I'll just give you the quick kind of 10,000 foot view of what the READY program is and what we do. And I've had some great conversations with the grants committee as well. So it would also just be helpful for me to just hear a little bit more from you all about how the committees all interact. And basically the goal here today is just to make sure that everyone is kind of up to speed on engagement with the READY program, as Karen and the grants committee have filled out our application form already, and we're going to start moving forward on that process. And just wanted to make sure that everyone was in the loop about what that involves, and kind of what our program does and what it all means to be engaged with the program. But I'll just dive in here. So READY, as we love our acronyms in Vermont, as I'm sure you all are becoming well aware, stands for the Rural Economic Development Initiative. So we're a small but mighty program at VHCB. And basically our role, and we were created by the state legislature as well and housed at VHCB. So our role is really to support small communities across the state with receiving technical assistance to support them with accessing significant and complex sources of funding. And basically to access those sources of funding to advance their community economic development projects. And we have a couple focus areas that I can get into that are in our legislation, but that's all to say that this village expansion project we've already kind of gone through that process and found it to be a fit for our mission areas. But basically, like I said, our role is to kind of recognizing that there's a lot of barriers for small towns and nonprofits to be able to access some of these complex sources of federal funding or federal funds that are flowing through the state, or sometimes other sources that are kind of outside of those 2 buckets. And so our role is to try to bring in the technical expertise to be able to make those processes easier and help communities have a better shot at accessing those funding sources. So in effect, the READY program is in a way a small grants program for technical assistance. So we have a network of professional consultants that we facilitate and gather each year that we procure, who are most often grant writing professionals, but we also work with other folks who provide different types of technical assistance as well. But the bread and butter of our work is really bringing on professional grant writing expertise with these community project teams to be able to help them through that complex grant application process. And our funding, though it acts like a small grant to the community or to the nonprofit that we may be working with, we try to really streamline the process, and basically we just make a direct contract with that consultant, with that grant writing professional or other technical assistance professional, so that way they can, you know, invoice us directly for their work versus, as I'm sure you guys are becoming familiar with funding, like a lengthy and complex reimbursement process. We try to avoid that because they're small grants, and we try to be a really nimble program. And so I guess the other piece to share on specifics is that our grant awards, for lack of a better term, are usually up to about $7,500 to $8,000. We have a little flexibility around that depending on what the project calls for and what the needs are. We're also utilizing a program called Municipal Technical Assistance Program, or MTAP. So that is a larger program at the state, and they provide funding to this program as well. So that allows us to have a little bit of flexibility around flood recovery and resilience projects as well. But basically, as I said, you know, our grants are kind of in the form of that contract with the consultant. So basically, when we help folks connect with a consultant who's a good fit for their project, that consultant will provide us with a scope of work that has been reviewed and approved by our client, and then present it to me to make sure it fits all of our boxes. And then what we do from there is we make a contract specifically for that amount, you know, up to our cap. So if the work is, you know, $7,800 or something like that, that's usually, you know, within our range of flexibility, and we would make a contract directly for that amount. So I will pause there for a second, and I can, there's a couple more things I can share, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions just around the structure of the program or how it works, or kind of what any obligations are within with this committee.
Anybody?
I just want to
Yeah, go ahead. Liz.
make sure I heard this right. I'm having a hard time. It's hard for me to hear you over there and watch you awkwardly over here. So I just want to make sure my brain's properly functioning. What I'm hearing is your program we apply for a grant to hire a consultant to help us write the big grant.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I just needed to clarify. Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. And so, as I like to say with folks, and I've already kind of had this conversation with Karen and a couple of colleagues on the grants committee specifically. What I like to just always share is kind of a level setting expectations that we like to say that grant writing is a team sport. So it definitely, although we're bringing in someone professional to support this effort, it definitely requires that team effort, because you all in the community, both the grants committee, and then again, why I wanted to connect with you all is because it sounds like you'll have a lot of the information about this project and the real specific elements, you know, from permitting to how, you know, maybe a revolving loan fund might be involved in this process. So again, it's really like bringing in all the minds with all the information, and the consultant is really there to help, you know, put some guardrails around that process and help kind of keep the project moving forward, also helping you shape responses to write those questions in the grant application to be as competitive as possible, make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So they're really there to like be that teammate with you all going through that process. So I just like to kind of share that with folks initially, but yes, you summarized it very well. And I think maybe I will use that in the future also. But yes, it's kind of a small grant to help folks write the big grant. Exactly.
I'm just curious, are there a lot of people who are, how wide is the pool of these consultants who write the grants? And how specific do they get? Are there subcategories of the experts that write these grants?
Absolutely. And I would say, for us, we have a network of anywhere at a given time between, I would say, 10 to 15 or more consultants that are working in this space. And as I mentioned, that's really the grant writing specific folks. Like I said, we do offer funding for other types of technical assistance if that's the priority over grant writing for these projects. So sometimes it might be like a little bit of architectural support or maybe a historic preservation review. And so I'm not counting those type of experts within that number. But I would say in terms of the grant writing piece, I would say generally there's definitely some specialization in there. There's some folks who are really focused on federal grant applications, who maybe have a lot of expertise in USDA funding or Northern Border Regional Commission funding. And then of course, there's kind of this category, and one of the grants you all are looking into is the Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery grants, that DR notification there. And so there are folks who have, worked with flood communities before on these type of applications. There are folks who are really involved in housing specifically, which is actually not the main focus area for READY, but because this project has a lot about enabling infrastructure, it is a really good fit for us and flood recovery. But there's folks who have that specialization. There's folks who work with farm and forest businesses for us in another category that we work with. So yeah, definitely quite a range of expertise. And I would say we have a pretty decent group of folks who are interested in working on these grants specifically. So a lot of the value add that the program provides as well, beyond just like the funding for that support, is if a community does not have a consultant in mind, we can identify in our consultant group who has the expertise or who has completed grants of a similar style before. And then what we would do is we connect the dots for folks, match make that, and then basically the community would connect with one or more of the consultants on our list that we feel would be a good fit and can make a selection from there. So that's kind of how that process would work from here. Yep.
Have we connected? Have you decided who might fit for us? And
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts in mind, and I've been coordinating a lot with Pat Moulton and then with Karen, of course, around, we have a quick online application that team has already filled out. And then in terms of I've reached out to a few of our consultants who have some experience with the CDBG program, and then a couple who specifically had experience with kind of flood resilient based grants. So I do have a couple folks in mind. I just need to follow up with them and make sure that they're available and have capacity to kind of write at this moment. And then from there, I would make a couple of introductory emails. And I believe Arian had sent me a couple folks who are going to be kind of the main contacts for this work, and I'll put them in touch to have that kind of initial informational conversation, see if it's a good fit, and if it's not, that's totally okay, and we can move on to the next person, or you can talk to a couple people and see what's the best fit for your group.
Great.
thank you.
Other questions? Mariah, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Now, I apologize again for our technical difficulties. I'll take full responsibility for it.
No worries. Thank you all so much. And I really appreciate the time. And I guess my only question for you all was I just wanted to try to get a better understanding of the interrelationship of the different town committees. And I assume that I'll be working mostly with Karen and the grants committee, but I'm just curious about kind of the interface of the two, as this team seems to be the one that's also like driving a lot of this project forward as well.
Right. So do you have a specific question for us?
I'm just curious how the committees interact, or what exactly is the structure for this particular project? Because for our background, right, like the READY project for us, like the client is the town and this kind of village expansion project. And so I'm just curious, there's this particular committee and then there's the grants committee. Is it one and the same? Is it different things?
Yeah,
I just kind of wrap my mind around that.
I'll try and answer people. The grants committee, the East Village Expansion Advisory Committee, we are sort of an instrumentality of the town. So we are authorized by the town to do this. The grants committee and other committees are committees of this group. I think that answers the whole question.
No, that's not quite right. So,
Please help me.
yeah, so this committee is an advisory group that the select board selected to head the research and the data gathering of the potential of the expansion. The grants committee is its own job.
Oh, the town's grants committee. I see.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Maybe
I had
clarify a little bit.
Thanks, Josh.
To clarify,
Please.
there is not a grants committee. it's a working group of like
Okay.
the grants administrator. Myself as the treasurer and other
Okay.
in town, including.
Non-official committee.
Not official.
Okay,
Working.
thanks for the correction.
Okay,
Gotcha.
but two separate things, and the work of the grant work group is supporting the potential of expansion.
Right, my confusion was the finance committee, not the grants committee. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and within our advisory group, we have other work groups, which is a finance, communications. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but
Potential buyers
Yeah.
potential buyers. So there are different work groups,
and communications.
yeah, within this group. And so we divided and conquered the information gathering work.
Mariah, is your question, who would be your single point of contact?
I had both were my questions. Yes, it was like I wanted to just understand better the lay of the land and the environment. It's just so awesome to see so many folks engaged in this work, and just wanted to make sure I had my bearings. But also, yes, the primary point of contact for me and for the consultant who we'll bring on, just to make sure that there's some good lines of communication with a large group like this.
I would just jump right out there and say that I would think your single point of contact would continue to be the grants committee, and they'll interface with us.
And with the select board.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that sounds great. And yeah, I guess any other questions for me at that time? I think that was all I really wanted to get my bearings straight on, and which is really helpful. And again, I guess before I ask for any additional questions, I just wanted to say also that this is it's a huge undertaking that you all are doing. It's just really impressive to see how you've all come together and really dove into this this really technical project, especially following such an intense disaster for your community. And I just want to say, like, I work with a lot of communities all over the state at varying points along the timeline of their own resilience projects, and I'm just really impressed with what you all have done and put together, and just it's just been a real pleasure to get to connect with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mariah.
Thank you.
Josh, you're going to talk to us about the CHIPS program. There was, by the way, an editorial in the Times Argus yesterday. I don't know how many people saw it, lauding the CHIPS program and its passage.
Donnie, I think that Josh is
Oh, that's not,
that you online, Josh?
Yeah, that's me.
oh, that's, okay, so we don't have,
We don't have Josh.
okay, well then, that puts you up, Lauren.
Okay, thank you, Donnie and everybody. So I'm updating what's going on with the communications committee. And there was a 7 days article that came out, I think it was on May 28th, that featured a number of different creative housing projects throughout the state. And this project was among those featured in that article. I think it was very positive in general. And I would say the big news from our committee is that after a couple months of trying to update our frequently asked questions page, we were finally able to get that up on the town website today. And that is because Kirsty and Vicky and Kim and I all worked very diligently on that. It is about 26 pages long. I think it covers 4 main areas. One is about the project. One is about finance and budget. Another area is about design and zoning, and another area, I'm trying to remember what the fourth one is. Can't remember that right now, but anyway, it's all up online. Bob Fancher put it up this morning, and Rick contributed the draft budget as of April 18th that he had presented. And so those documents are both up online now, and there were significant updates since we had done those frequently asked questions back before the town meeting, because so many different things about the project had changed, including the cost estimates, and we had more updated information, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all up there, and really have to appreciate the efforts of the committee, particularly Kirsty, who really did a fantastic job rewriting a lot of the language to make it easier to read. So I really appreciate that. And then we are providing regular updates on Facebook and Front Porch Forum, which include highlights from these meetings, etc. And I was contacted yesterday by a reporter from Judy Woodruff's PBS NewsHour. It's a particular show in DC. They had done a report on Front Porch Forum and had interviewed me, and I talked to them about this project, and they were interested in doing a story on this. So I am going to be talking with a producer from her show next week. And I believe also that Arian was interviewed by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm not quite sure what's happening with that. So that is the update on the Communications Committee. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay.
Budget and finance, Lauren, still you.
Okay, so I'm reporting for Arian. He's away out of the country right now, and it's probably about 11:30 his time where he is. Basically, it's just that it looks like that this project, the East Village Expansion Project, is really the center project for the town in terms of the recommendation from the Grants Committee to the Select Board that this project fits into the box of the Community Development Block Grants, DR, which are being made available to Washington and Lamoille counties, really for the flood of 2023. And we just heard from Mariah about the fact that we are basically hoping to get some assistance from the READY program for a grant writer who has expertise in this area for the Community Development Block Grant, because it's extremely idiosyncratic, or it's a very complicated grant to apply for, and we need somebody who really has expertise with this. So we're very pleased that the READY program is working with us. And the only other thing is just an update on the fact that we had asked for approval of a $150,000 loan from the Vermont Community Foundation, and we had met with a couple of members of the Select Board about that, along with Lawrence Miller, who is on the investment side of the Vermont Community Foundation. He presented a loan document that the town has been reviewing and presented to the town lawyer. I'm not quite sure which lawyer that is at this point. I can't remember. I think it might be Eli Emerson, who works with town funding. And so that's kind of in the works. And that grant would allow us to progress with the next phase of engineering costs. And I think he described it as an unsecured loan. So there's no like collateral being offered, and it's very low interest. And so anyway, that's been presented and that's in the works. And that would also allow us to proceed with the archaeological work that is necessary for applying for the Community Development Block Grant, because the Community Development Block Grant has a lot of very specific requirements, and archaeological work on the site is one of them. So there's a group from UVM that has been engaged, and I think is sort of in the stages waiting to do that work. So anyway, that's the update on budget and financing.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren?
I do have one statement relating to her last piece there. I hear through the grapevine that Bram does not want our archaeological work done before the sale is done. So this needs to be coordinated with him. And he does own the land.
Okay. Well, that's all the more reason for the Select Board to move forward with the purchase and sale agreement
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
as soon as possible.
He may be fine with it, but I'm hearing secondhand that He does not want that done because it has screwed up sales in the past.
Well, I asked Carl about it today and he had no more information than he had previously. Except to say, everybody keeps asking. So, Josh, yeah.
Just like, the, the article that Aaron was interviewed, I think was the Washington Post.
No, Wall Street Journal.
Okay, he's in the Washington Post also.
Oh, really? Oh, okay,
Getting around.
great. Do you have a copy of that, Josh?
Bram shared it on the Facebook page.
Cool.
I can send it to you.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Gonna move along. Rick, now you're up again.
Okay. Should I just pick up where I left off? Is that okay with everybody? Okay,
You
So-
weren't that far into it.
I really wasn't, Donnie. So
Sorry, I don't want to be annoying, but we'll be on the first Zoom when we went over that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you should start from the beginning because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
a
no,
good
that's
point.
fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
So could we look at the first one again?
Yes.
Try and remember what I said as a prologue last time and repeat it fairly accurately. This is the site plan that we're currently working with, which is a result of phase one engineering drawings. And I think everybody's fairly up to speed on this. And so what I understood our job to be as a study group, and that is John, Liz and I, was to take this and look at areas where we could increase the usable site area. And additionally, what we've done is look at some things that we thought maybe didn't work so well or had changed with regard to the site criteria since we've last done any drawing work on this. So the next one, if you could, yep. Schedule. So this is kind of a real quick diagram of some of the things we talked about. Where those red X's are over on the right, those are Liz takes authorship for those, so that we're really clear that we're trying to get rid of the road that's coming straight across over to East Hill. And what we're now think we may be able to do is buy additional wetland area through the state program if it's not indeed a federal wetland, which we currently have a pretty good indication that it is not, and change that so that it's a more suitable location really for everybody that I've talked to, of moving that up the sheet so that the entrance is more away from the existing houses, not shining into anybody's house, not right next to somebody's, I don't know whether it's your living room or what it is, John, or your bedroom, but it did go really close to John's house. And as a federal wetland, the discussion was we could move it closer to his house, but that was really our only option. So this is I think an improvement if we can get that to happen. And we're really waiting on a better wetland understanding to see whether that can go forward. The shapes that are on there were really some discovery about and discussion about certain aspects to the existing site. If you remember, the hill was one of the things that during the community design process, nobody really wanted us to develop the hill. And so we discussed, the three of us and no further, what is so fantastic about the hill? What's behind that? And I think what we came up with was, one, it adds a buffer to the East Hill area that's there already. And two, there is a concern about really being able to see this neighborhood and its density. And so more on density in a bit, but density was a discussion that we talked about really quite a bit in our efforts. So what that big circle is, the hill, and what I'm kind of diagrammatically proposing here is that maybe we add some other, what I'm going to call berms for now. But a berm could be as high as this table, 2 or 3 feet, or it could be really tall, like the hill is, but maybe think about using the aspects of the hill that are strategically and important from a planning standpoint, but taking the parts that are not so important as a buffer and using those for housing development. And so that circle is bisected by a brown and a blue area. The blue area might be area where we sell or take away part of the hill and replace it somewhere else on the site where it better screens the neighborhood. Just a quick discussion about density. I think we had a lot of discussion about density, and it is it's one we try, I think, to tease apart, and I think we did a fairly good job of it. I'd break it into at starting to get into what it is, John, and correct me if I'm wrong. But the density is three things. One, it is adding to the disruption during construction. It's potentially, and that is something that I think we're going to need to think about and talk about more. I think it's also the concern that increased density means increased numbers of people there and therefore increased problems from more houses, or the increased size of the community will cause more difficulty. And that's sort of how I paraphrase what I heard. I'm looking to you too. The third one is the density will, I'm going to be really blunt, that density will look bad. And I think that's when I really want to tease apart and say, what about aesthetics of this community and how are we going to look at it? And what does that mean? And I think that's an important discussionary piece that we have, because I'm not really sure that more or less houses there are going to really make that much difference in whether it's an aesthetically pleasing development or not. It's really how we go about doing that that's going to be the important criteria. So I think maybe more about aesthetics of this later on as we get further into it, if that's okay. The green areas on there are some wetland areas that we sort of targeted, and we think it's strategic to look at those areas and say, what about filling or using those areas for more development? And so our concept was to take really those two large blue squarish shapes that are a combination of wetland areas that we might fill somewhat, and the hill, and put that soil somewhere. And the soil that I'm talking about is the amount of earth that's going to need to dug out to create the roads that will be filled back in with road subbase. And so there's a fair amount of fill that needs to be what's called wasted on this site, and so that we don't take it off the site. And I think there's an economic and potentially there's some benefits to the community as well. So those two blue areas are the spots where we said, okay, let's look at these and see what difference that would make to the underlying scheme here. And so what I did was what I'll call not a schematic design, but really a test to see what we could get this to do and how it might change, trying to keep some of the key pieces of it. So Jared, can you scoot ahead? One more. Yeah, perfect. So this option really has a lot of the features that the previous one did, but it increases the number of lots that are there. And so the green area in the middle is the commons area, which is really pretty much where it was in the past. And you can see that the road is more of a triangular shape, which creates these pockets of potential areas of development. And I don't think this is worth too much time discussing and debating, but we got up to around 57 lots on this site. Now, some of them were arguably to us maybe too small. And maybe that's, yeah, Liz is shaking her head real vehemently. But I wanted to just go through and say, what do we think the maximum amount we could potentially fit on here would be, and I kind of understood that to be our charge of what could we ultimately do? Do I think we could get slightly more on there? Maybe. Do I think that probably we have a few too many on there? I do, and I think our study group did, but we wanted to stop here and get the response of this group to see if, what your thoughts are on where we've come to so far.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Oh, yeah, sure, please. Yeah.
What percent of lots are too small? How small are they?
Chrissy, I'm not really sure, but like if you look in the there's a bunch of dead end areas that are shared drives that come off, and there are two that are right across from each other, kind of in the center lower part. I think some of the ones on the upper drive are maybe kind of tight. They were like mini house only sites. And we thought maybe we could squeeze that around to make them slightly bigger, but I'm not really sure. We weren't sure whether that was worth it or not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did we overlay it to one of the lots that was already created on the master design and it was about the same size? So I thought we did a
I
little
think we
exercise.
did, Liz, and it might have been a little smaller, so it's not drastically smaller than the previous mini house lots, but some of them we felt might be a bit tight.
I want to say the number, because that's what sticks in my head, which is what I remember us estimating, and this is pure estimation, nothing drawn, yeah, but it was like 0.05.
You what?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right, like yeah,
So
0.05
and
acres.
that's one thing I would like clarified, or at least show me the documentation where if this is designated as a PUD, we can
So
ignore
what was the,
planned unit development.
okay,
Can we? Is it okay to ignore Plainfield zoning because that feels wrong? And that's what we're being told.
Yeah, John, I heard that,
Yeah.
and I said that in our meeting, but I'm not really sure, and I think you asking the question means that the three of us probably have to circle back with that answer, because I don't know
I
that
don't
for
know the
sure.
answer either, and
Yeah.
that's, we need to know the answer, and I don't know where to find it.
Well,
That's
Will
the.
Well, I
Hogan,
think it would be Will Hogan.
yeah, he
Ask
would be
Will.
the key.
Okay, thanks.
It would be Will on the planning commission. Who just
Because, I mean,
helped
that-
update the zoning laws.
Yeah, I mean, and I was involved in that process, and I'm familiar with what they did. It just seems counterintuitive isn't the right word. It just seems like we have zoning for a reason.
Right.
Being able to just ignore it seems wrong, that's.
And as a counter to what John's saying, what I said in the discussion is what the PUD concept is, that you can have a higher density, but you offset it by a lot of open land around the outsides, is the concept of it. Whether we actually fall within that or not,
Yeah.
neither of us knew.
Yeah, so it averages out to larger lots, or, yeah.
Right.
Something like that, John. And I haven't done any more studying on it. I think we wanted to know what this group felt.
I
Yeah,
agree,
yeah.
I agree.
So did you, is helpful for me, but it's probably, I don't know if it's available or not. Is there a way to overlay the first map that you had onto this one so we can see the major changes or not?
Yeah, it's actually there, Vicky, but it's
Okay.
kind of hard to see it. Can
Okay.
you zoom in to this area right here?
Is that just a picture or a scan of your vellum? Is that what you got?
Oh, I see, yeah.
I scanned it, and so you can kind of see the road going right in through the bottom of the green space, right where the arrow is there.
Rick,
Yeah.
what are those circles, like off on the right, the brown circles?
The brown circles are potential areas for wasting soil, Lauren, so that we can create more hills there potentially. So that was just an idea.
Catchment ponds, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then the circles that are not brown are the wastewater catchment ponds.
And these things. ground hatched.
Yeah, like those, only right down the sheet from it, Jared, right there. Yes, thank you.
How many building sites were in the original design that you did the day you had the 2-day meeting with everybody? And how many are planned now and the latest iteration?
Okay, that's a really good question. So there were 40 lots, but there actually were only something like 34 hookups to the site. And so it was mid-30s is what I recall, Donnie. And so this is 57.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very different number.
But Rick, from the charrette, I thought, or the community design workshop, I thought there were some of the plans, maybe before the final plan of the day, where there were up to like 70 housing sites.
I recall that too, especially when we were doing the exercise with the wooden houses. People felt much more comfortable with putting houses close to one another. And one of the struggles even we were having as a smaller group was, what does this mean? What is this like? And I think we're going to have to do a bit more digging to get really comfortable with what does this density look like as you walk down a street here?
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Alicia Weiss, for the record. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and the expertise that folks bring to this. And so forgive the somewhat naive question, but if someone's coming in, at what point do various scenarios of different densities interface with a study about additional traffic impact, noise pollution? I mean, you're sort of getting with that with some of the aesthetics, what does it feel like? But I've heard lots of questions about traffic, some about noise, some about even light pollution, which I feel like we're really lucky. We don't have a lot of that here. But, and I've never really heard a satisfactory answer, because I've heard a lot of, well, don't worry. We lost a lot of houses, but we're talking about not only adding more units than I believe we lost in the last flood, but we're also talking about adding them in a concentrated area. So that in terms of the traffic and the noise pollution and other factors, that's very different from when we have those same number of units spread all the way up to Brook Road. So I'm sure there's some point in which your process meets the examination of those factors and some kind of model for predicting that, but I don't know.
I think your question is way ahead of where we are right now, myself. I think it's things to be thinking about, but we're definitely not there, because this is the first time this group has even talked about the number that we might put on there. So we're just beginning to have that discussion, and those are criteria that we'll be thinking about. I don't know yet when a public discussion will be, but it is going to happen.
Thank you.
But there was a traffic study done by Du Bois and King, and it is cited in the questions and answers that we just posted, Alicia. And you can look at that, and I think we have the letter from Du Bois and King on that traffic study, if you'd like to look at that.
And what are the underlying assumptions of that model? How many units were there?
I think it was something like, doing this from memory, I think it was like 75 units, and they said that it wouldn't appreciably, Kirsty may remember because she helped me with the questions and answers, but I think it was like 75, and it didn't meet the threshold of, appreciably increasing traffic noise. But it is cited in the Q&A, and you could look at that. In terms of noise, I don't think we have, I don't think we've done any studies about that. I mean, certainly during construction, there will be noise, but there are regulations in the town about hours of noise and that kind of thing. I mean, we've certainly had a lot of noise down by Hudson Avenue and, by the Mill Street Bridge, which they rebuilt. And in the wake of the flood, there's been a lot of noise in terms of, skid, whatever those things are called, all those big machines coming in to move rocks around and, put riprap down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure there are other variables I haven't thought of. I'm just trying to, and I think Rick answered it later. Thank you, Lauren. is that, you say that study is cited, is there actually a link?
I have it pulled
Okay.
up. I can read it.
That's, that, I want to at some point hear how the burns are created, if you don't mind. We just
Yeah, I
pile
think,
this stuff up.
I think we just wait on that. It's a concept that this group hasn't really even heard about or endorsed, and we probably want to have our discussion about that as to whether people like that or not. I don't know if this, what this committee thinks about it.
Rick,
think- It would be
Sure.
nice to just have this traffic study in this recording in case people watch it or the notes. So is it okay if I read that little blurb?
yeah,
Okay, so the new neighborhood is expected to add about 36 car trips during the busiest morning hour on weekdays. It's expected to add about 52 car trips during the busiest afternoon hour on weekdays. These numbers are actually less than the level at which Vermont usually requires a more detailed traffic study, which is typically 75 busy hour trips. This study estimated that the East Village would have 34 single-family detached houses, 6 multifamily senior houses, and 10 single-family attached houses like townhomes.
Thank you.
thanks. Rick, I just want to go over a couple of things I heard. I think I heard you say, I just want to see if I heard this right. Did you say something like more houses, the less aesthetic?
No.
That's a,
I think that was so I wasn't clear on that. I think that was a concern that people had about the aesthetics of a higher density. So in other words, I would phrase it this way, Donnie, that we, in our group discussion and in our group discussion only, people were concerned about the aesthetics of a higher density.
yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's very much a separate issue that we need to tease out of how do we make this a nice an attractive community. That's, I think, the real issue, more so than what that aspect of density is. I don't think that more houses makes an uglier spot. I disagree with that completely, but I think that's a concern that people have.
okay. Well, isn't the number of dwellings that we would choose to build dependent greatly on the size of the community development block grant we get or don't get? If we get a very big community block grant, I mean, as I understood, the whole idea of increasing the number of lots we would sell would be to increase the income to pay for it. But if the community block grant comes in very strong, the way we hope, then we have more options to build less. Is that a fair understanding?
That is exactly, Donnie, I'm
That's-
very glad that you brought that up, because
Yeah.
that is my understanding of
Just
this exercise.
Yeah.
Is that we were asked to find what we felt was the maximum amount
Right.
of housing we could see on this particular rendition of the drawing, and that would be like the max, and then hopefully we would have room to adjust that.
Right, if we got zero from the community developed block grant, this is the maximum amount we could put in. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, but that's not the task that Arian gave us, because Arian very clearly in the last meeting made a case for increasing density with the grant or without the grant. both.
Okay, Bill.
And I don't agree with that either.
Oh, well,
I agree the same.
that's a discussion we
Yeah.
can have, I mean,
Yes.
and an argument we can have.
Right,
Yeah.
but I agree with what you had to say. It was, we were looking at one extreme if we got no
Yeah.
funds, and
Right.
the other if
That's-
we got the funds, and that's
That's to
what
be-
the initial
Right,
discussion
Yes.
was about before anything else.
okay.
And that's
I
what
think
that
to
is,
John's
right.
point, what I heard about it was that, and we didn't know then, and we may know now, but what is the highest likelihood that we'll get the grant in terms of the viability and number of lots? And so instead of trying to figure out what that sweet spot was going to be for either of these two scenarios, I showed this test of a lot of lots on there, and these guys said, you know what, let's just stop there and have the finances play into it. And so this might be a max, but then maybe there's a min too. And maybe there's a spot in between that we really want to hit here.
So, I think I heard you say there's still a question about the wetlands and what that might mean to build more in that area. Is that true?
Yeah.
And so there may potentially be a cost to do that or not? There would be.
There will
That
be,
would
Vicky,
be
yes.
another reason to take into consideration of why we would do something or not with additional lots.
Right,
potentially,
our,
Because of the funding.
yeah, our understanding is the Corps of Engineers, if they're regulating this class 2 wetlands, is we can't do any of that, period. But the federal government is relaxing their rules, and our understanding is that they are not going to regulate class 2 wetlands anymore. Then it only falls under the state, and the state does allow us to pay for using more wetlands.
And it's sort of I mean, this is going to be somewhat a mathematical exercise because we're going to have to pay to use the wetlands.
Right,
And we get more lots, which we potentially would get some revenue out of.
right.
But the diagram where I was showing areas where there are berms and wetlands filled
Right.
is a benefit because we don't have to take soil off the site. So there's some cost added back into the project for that. So I think it's those three variables that we need to go through in a mathematical scenario and say, where's the right mathematical balance with this? Does that make sense, Vicky?
Yeah, I mean, I had heard before that, I probably won't say it this way, but using the soil can improve some of the existing wetlands there. Somehow it benefits the soil, that's what I've heard, but I don't know if that's true or not. Just something I've heard.
And one thing that sort of come up with me personally, and I don't know what we want to do with this, but we may want to build in some sort of wetland improvement. And I don't even know what that means and how we should go about doing it. But if we're taking away wetlands, I mean, it just sort of ethically and sort of as a good idea, we may want to make some improvements to the wetlands that are around it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just a note on that point, the area of buyout, right? Some of the discussions about creating a floodplain and in those areas to sort of help mitigate the hazard downstream. Like, you may want to investigate, like, in terms of like what the town is obligated to take on that as evergreen. And we can, there's a lot of money available to create floodplain. And so can we tie that floodplain creation and buyout of the homes that are going to be removed to this project to swap our obligation to well?
Yeah, and I
Oh,
think,
I see.
I want to say, Sandy, we had that discussion with Sandy directly when she was at my house, and I want to say she said it was something like 10-1 if you're creating it to offset usage. I may be totally off base there, but there was a huge ratio there that if you take a foot of wetlands, you need to create 10 feet elsewhere, kind of thing.
No problem.
Yes.
And I think it matters too, what the quality of the
Yeah,
the stream edge, the riparian edge is, because one is not technically a wetland and another may be. So I think there's some kind of relationship there as well that I really don't understand. I mean, it's a real head twister here, and we're trying to dig into the middle of this and give you something to think about.
There was a wildlife study, I believe, done.
Yeah.
And was that taken into consideration when you decided where you were gonna place the existing lots?
The main area of, I think it's Rose Paul identified snipe habitat there. And I had one brief conversation with George, and I think it's more to the right of the area, closer to East Hill Road and kind of on the upper side of the sheet. And I'd like to have more discussion about that at some point with Rose to know exactly what that is and
What it means,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Putting it on the to-do list.
Is that on mine? Ours? Okay.
I think so, and, I have a couple other thoughts, questions. First is, how many in this drawing, how many of the planned unit developments are there?
there's 57 lots, right?
57 lots, yeah.
I think I'm trying to wrap my brain around how that, I think I need to read by myself on what that means.
We-
A mixture. I
We
think.
didn't get very deep
Okay.
into analyzing and proofing this out. That I think is where we stopped and we said, gosh, this looks like as much as we can fit on there. And we really didn't do any technical proofing of it. Because everybody says, well, wait a minute, you're way off
Why waste your
base,
time?
and why would we go any further?
Second thought, question, I've had people ask me, I don't know how to phrase this right, but if we're getting rid of wetlands and we're building homes here, are we creating a scenario where folks who build homes here are going to have their basements or whatever flooded because of that change?
Or folk, existing folks. have that
Yeah.
change.
So I think, yeah, and
Part of the design is runoff control, but I mean, that's,
Storm.
yeah, the stormwater has got to be taken into account, but I don't know. I'm not an expert.
I'm not either. I think the soils are, what's the correct term? Hydric. And by looking at the soils, you can see that they are of a type that is wetland-like. Whether you can dewater that adequately or not, so that you don't get water build up against basement walls is one question. And then the part that I do know about is you can take water away from basement walls. And I know how to do that if you've got enough elevation change on your site. But so you can, the answer is maybe.
that would be considered at some point in the process, so we're not setting people up to,
To fail?
yeah.
Yeah, it does sound like, yeah, good.
So I know it's early in the process, but our road commissioner, what does he think about the change? Have you even seen this?
The who? The road?
Gentleman sitting over there.
Oh, what does Josh think about it?
Right.
I haven't talked with Josh at all about this. The only conversation I've had with the roads department was with Michael about potentially moving that road to where we're showing it now.
Okay.
That's as far as I've gotten with
Okay.
that. So
I don't think this is a drastic difference, in terms of like what's required from the maintenance and funding. Because like the actual length of road relative to the whole town is so minimal. In any particular line item, there isn't gonna be a drastic increase. I'm also the water wastewater commissioner. The water and wastewater, like added service and asset management. Because it's new, that asset, it has, an 80-year lifespan. So we reserve funds based on the life cycle of the materials that are input into the ground. And so all of that ties back to our current budgeting and financing. Now, I will say what does not exist is the town does not have a capital plan. So, and that is a big no-no, in my opinion. But I'm going to begin to work on a capital plan that's more extensive that would take what, some of these
Appreciate that and.
broad brush strokes here. And I think that, from a perspective of, revenue gain to the town by having, like these homes relative to the cost and expense of operating them is very minimal. Density is very good for the bottom line of the town. Like, that's the thing, if you wanna keep your taxes low and you wanna keep like everybody housed, we should all move into a hive and then have the rest of the town be wild nature. Like, because that is efficient, like cities work because they're efficient. And so, in considering density, as somebody who pays the bills here, it's beautiful. And to your question about, the size of a lot, I lived in a house in Plainfield that was 840 square feet, which could easily fit in somewhere between a 0.5 acre and tenth of an acre, and very comfortably fit in a tenth of an acre.
Yeah.
For a one-story house with 3 small bedrooms.
0.05 acres
It's
is
pretty-
2,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's just a little too small for an 850 square foot house.
Yeah.
But a tenth of an acre is very comfortable, and that's not a small house. That is like, that's a real house. No one would be like, that's not a house. It's like, no, they really built it. Like, also, I hate mowing the lawn. Why are you insisting that I have to mow a lawn? That I don't want to mow a lawn. Like, and
You have the free that you get to buy.
the, so. Like, and just to kind of, I just want to kind of respond also to like, in these discussions about aesthetics and noise and lights and traffic. Like, I live on Route 2 in the old hardware store space. I've lived there since 2021. I am happy to talk about noise and traffic and sleeping through like jackhammers on the Mill Street Bridge. And,
Jake
and,
Breaks coming down the hill, it's ridiculous.
and the people who live above me lost their home in the 2023 flood. And I am absolutely certain they would find it much more pleasurable to live in that density there than to live upstairs, like across the intersection. And they pay $1,700 a month in rent. And for what we are offering here, the potential to do a revolving loan fund to help collateralize these obligations to the debt incurred to construction and purchase. There is so much we can do to create the opportunity for people to own their own home in this town and not have to live in a marginal area. I live in an illegal apartment. It's not zoned correctly. Like this, we have very little opportunity in this town for people to have just a simple, comfortable living. And whether it's 40, 35, or 57, like the people who need this to happen, like are not, they would love this over the places that they are forced to live through the economics of the current situation.
Anybody else?
I live on a tenth of an acre. I don't know what a fifth of an acre is like, but I do know that my husband likes to mow our lawn using a scythe. No lawnmower, no lawnmower needed, no lawnmower needed. And I do know that the carbon footprint of New Yorkers is very low, like living in a high density, they have the lowest carbon footprint. So just saying.
Okay.
I think I have a question. What feedback do you need from the group?
Well, I don't know. I think we wanted to put this out there and have you be thinking about exactly what we're talking about. I don't think we were looking for a definitive answer right now, but rather think about all of these issues and kind of give us some direction. Maybe at the next meeting and we're not all here and maybe won't be over the summer, but want to give people time to digest this and think about it and continue to hear, I guess.
Yeah, I think you said it right at the beginning that we just wanted to we didn't want to get too deep into the weeds of it until we knew whether or not we were on the right track. Do we want more? Do we want less? Do we want? Yeah, what is the direction that we should be looking at? Because we could go in multiple different directions.
But I also think the community development block grant is going to dictate a lot what we end up proposing. I think
Yes.
that's the key thing.
I think, yeah, that's That's the core of what I want to say next too.
Okay. I think we're up to you, Eli, prospective buyers,
I'm gonna try.
unless they're, I'm just, I'm sorry, go ahead, of course.
Sense for us to invite Will from the
Oh,
zoning
good.
committee to one of our upcoming meetings to talk about
Unless it's just a simple question that he can answer yes or no. I mean, is it, that'd be, I'm happy to invite Will, but if he can just say, he can answer John's question.
That's, yeah, and I'm happy to reach out to him.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, Kirsty, that, I heard John volunteering for it in our group to kind of check into that a bit more, but we probably need to.
Across the street from me, no big deal.
Yeah,
Right.
Thank you.
thanks, Kirsty.
Okay, Eli.
All right, here I go. Sandy and I visited, Johnny and Kay's house down in the village, which is, and just a brief synopsis, it's a 400 square foot home that they are building themselves for final cost between $80,000 and $100,000. 400 square feet feels small to me, but that's just my opinion. I think that had a meeting as a work group with Sandy, Walker, and Paula. And Jared wasn't able to attend that one, but we talked about a bunch of different things. Walker and Sandy really talked a lot about like financing algorithm that Walker is trying to build. Walker called it a recursive calculator, which I think is that's a good word. I'm gonna use that a lot. That's great. Yeah, there are a bunch of questions that all feedback about how this can happen, that feedback into whether or not they will work, right? So, for example, the question of a developer, right? Like if a loan is taken out that requires there to be a developer so that a specific organization or the town or a nonprofit or a literal construction company could be held accountable for the debt incurred, right? There's some question of whether or not that's doable if people who buy lots want to build their own house, right? That's like less insurable, right? Like less assured of an investment.
Like that.
It's really, and the hope is that enough people would build in a insurable way, for lack of a better phrase, to offset people who want to build a yurt or want to build their own tiny house, right? Or yeah, whatever it is, right? Want to do it in a more affordable way. But I don't know how the legalities of that would end up happening. So please.
Just ask, so if you're talking about if we're utilizing the revolving loan fund and that money being used for lots that are being built with an insurable, like, so that the town isn't gonna risk losing getting that.
Not specifically, no, I'm not.
Just talking in general.
In general,
Okay.
I don't personally have enough knowledge of which loans or grants would require that. With the revolving loan fund, I think it would be the loaner, right? The town would become the loaner and they would be the one that sets the requirements.
Yes.
But the revolving loan fund would specifically be for a construction loan, which I think people who are building their own houses, like doing the labor themselves, wouldn't be doing, whereas so anyway, it's all, and I've been really intimidated by how all of those questions kind of feed back into,
It's hard.
it's really, really tricky. So, one of the things, like the chip TIF question, right? So my basic understanding of that loan is that it borrows against the increase in value of the land based on those.
Yep.
Yeah, based on the houses that are built there. And that would be a situation where I think you would need a developer to hold accountable for that increase in value. So anyway, all of that is something that I've been like just trying to understand. And the basic thing that I think you all asked us to do is call people and ask them if they're still interested. So we're gonna have a meeting soon to on Monday to come up with like our spreadsheet that we fill out as we call people and ask them that question. And we can build an online
Response form or whatever.
response form off of that same spreadsheet, right, off of the same questions. The questions that I had just written down are, right, what are you still interested, right? And then what are you interested in? Trying to ask them like what their ideal scenario would be like, right? Like this person wants a quarter acre with a 4-bedroom house, and what their actual like affordability is, right?
They're gonna ask you costs right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly, right, and so then,
Yeah.
and I wanted to be prepared and say like, here's all the support that you'll be able to get, but we don't have all those answers right now, so. Yeah, right, kind of like trying to build out the scenarios, basically the 2 scenarios that y'all have been talking about, do we get this loan, do we get the block grant? Do we, or does it have to be self-funded? So what's your ideal scenario? What can you actually afford to pay in a monthly mortgage or whatever it is, whatever situation we come up with? What would make your ideal situation doable? How much support would you need? And then do you all have any other questions that you can think of that you would want to go in that initial like phone call?
I think. Oh.
One, I think finding out if they are interested in self-building or contractor. And then this might already be in your, what are you interested in, but what's the smallest amount of land they would actually want?
Right, that would be included in the, like, what's your ideal, right? Like, what's your ideal house and what's the idea?
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the smallest amount would be good to know. The other thing that I would add is, would they be interested in? I'm just wondering whether there's some way to ascertain whether they would want to connect with Down Street Housing or Habitat for Humanity in terms of those housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think those would be more complex options, right? Like, if your ideal scenario is an apartment, right? Like,
Right.
you afford to pay in rent, and
Right.
if your ideal scenario is a condo, right? Yeah, so those are also.
Yeah. I would add, oh, sorry.
You can go ahead, Lauren.
No, I would add just a couple things. Regarding the revolving loan fund, we've been making some inquiries about different entities that might manage a revolving loan fund. So those might be, for example, Down Street Housing. You know, we've had a call with them about whether they would manage this thing. They have managed revolving loan funds and they're capable of doing it. I had a call with East Rise Credit Union about that, whether they would manage it, because there is a way for them to make some money on that. And there are people that have expertise managing revolving loan funds. So I think that's something that we're looking into. And, you know, as you said, Eli, the revolving loan fund would be not for the purchase of the actual land, but for the construction of the houses. And what we had talked about with Karen Hatcher in terms of the application for the CDBG grant is that we would apply for all this money for the infrastructure, and then when we sold the lots, the revenue from the sale of the lots would go into the revolving loan fund that would help people actually construct their houses or put up
Or whatever,
a
yeah.
manufactured home or something like that.
So should one of the questions be then, because purchasing land, I'm not familiar with it, but I understand that it's a totally different, like, you really need more cash than you, because there's no asset per se.
Right, exactly.
So that might be.
Go ahead, Josh.
So one of the things that I've been advocating for in this process is some of that CDBG-DR fund should go to seed the revolving loan fund. And Plainfield's revolving loan fund, beginning in 1985 and has a history of being utilized in town. One of the advantages of the town having controlling that revolving loan fund is essentially the town can put a lien on the property if there is a payment. And let's take a moment and consider like the concept of Jubilee, like which means, essentially loan forgiveness. Like what mechanisms do we have available to relieve people of debt if in the instance that they, become unable to pay? Like, because if we are saying, we want you to give us money for this project, and we want some of that money to be in a revolving loan fund. However, like, maybe because that creates a pooled asset of risk, right? We are able to kind of minimize our overall risk if this person or that person, like their yurt burns down or whatever, they have to move or, something. Like, it was never like money that we as the town had to generate as like money into our coffers. So it's very easy to consider a scenario where we have maybe certain conditions where we have loan forgiveness. But I understand that it is, believe me, it is preferable to have a financial institution administering your
Yeah.
day-to-day payments and tracking of all of that funding. But having the ability to control and direct like how we respond to those situations gives us the ability to kind of, because it is our community and we know the people who are going to be there and living in community with them every day and understanding their struggles, we can be much more flexible administering those funds in a compassionate way, and while still returning the money back to the revolving loan fund. And even with sort of your typical like risk percentage of failure to pay, the overall pooled risk will still create a revenue back to the town into the revolving loan fund that can then move away from this project out further into like the town as a whole, to help other locations in the need for housing and the other things that are in the revolving loan fund details, which are on the town website. If you just search revolving loan fund, it has not been updated in some time, but it's quite an expansive program. And I think like, I would like the revolving loan fund to stay to meet its ideals and its set goals that were set out back in the 80s and 90s when it was created. And they're much more expansive than what we're and we should be thinking as a town and not as a bank per se.
But would there, I guess there's a question, would there be negotiation with whoever was administering
Yeah.
the revolving
exactly.
loan fund? So
part of the
we would have
contract,
a
so-
say
Yeah.
in some of the things, that you're mentioning?
Yeah,
It's all negotiable.
And those services for the transactional administration of collecting the payment, applying it, the billing, et cetera, that is worked into you know, the fees associated and the return interest, you know, what they're borrowing.
So, I mean, I like the idea of keeping it here for, everything you just mentioned. What's the capacity of the town to actually, because that's a huge volume,
Without new money, I would.
would it require like another staff person to like, I don't know. Or
I
what
think-
would it require?
I think once we get into the scenario where we are kind of setting up the fund and, you know, in terms of like the overall project that you are all sort of charged with studying, that project will require some project management that does not exist yet. And that project management could move through the phase of this, the large exchange of, you know, lending in the front end. And at some point, everyone will have their home and et cetera, and the money will come back. And being able to kind of hold that fund, right? Then administering those funds out again. So it's gonna be like, the curve on the workload is gonna be like this, and then it's gonna have like a long tail. So I think the town's capacity through the revolving loan fund committee, which many of you may want to transition being on. Because why wouldn't you? You've been working on the project this whole time. Now let's continue this project of moving beyond just, you know, village expansion. Like, and, you know, so it is energizing in a way because of its openness. It does contain some risk to us but what we are doing is we are saying, we're not a bank, we're a community and we're willing to take more chances with the people we know, right? And, you know, like, maybe, oh, I realize not a good risk. Like, you know, it's like, you're able to kind of understand, you know, what's happening in the community and like, ideally, you know, you want that money to go out, you know, and, because we're not a bank, we don't have shareholders, we don't need that money to come, all of it to come back to us either. You know, we could have like we could create different, you know, payback structures that say, okay, well, you know, as you are kind of in this long-term lending that the town is able to do, like have diminishing returns over time on a tail so that we actually do give away the money to create this, you know, to some portion of it, depending on what we ultimately end up with.
Go ahead.
To bring,
One other point on the revolving loan fund, which I talked with Josh a little bit about, sort of ties into the aesthetics discussion that we're having. And I think in our study group, there was a feeling that it would be nice to have nice looking houses in a nice looking community, but we really don't want to add more controls to the town and more burden on the town to make those controls enforceable and then enforce them. And the thing that I thought would be kind of neat about the revolving loan fund is that potentially, I find that if you go around and look at communities, there are certain aspects about them that are universal and very simple to do that make them really neat. One of them, and I'll just give a few examples. One is some nice landscaping on people's lots in the front. Another is porches. And if the revolving loan fund could encourage people to, on a very modest house, build a porch, that would really give back to the aesthetics of the community and make us all say, wow, we've done a really nice house. And at the same time, I think it can still be pretty economical. So just a thought on the revolving
to
loan
put your
fund.
400 square feet in focus, that's roughly a semi-trailer. Semi-trailers are 53 feet by 8 feet, roughly 400 square feet. Not in that shape, of course. but-
Interesting,
Yeah.
yeah, feel
So-
free to visit, John
Yeah.
Kay's house, and it's a nice looking house,
And as a point, our zoning currently says you cannot live in a yurt year round, and you cannot put in permanent plumbing at all in a yurt in the village area. Yep. They consider it a tent, just like an RV,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
I just hope in relation to what you're talking about, the sort of dreams for how the revolving loan fund could work and the aesthetics and how many, I hope that we get a community development block grant big enough that gives us the opportunity to make these choices.
Yeah, yeah.
So that because the bigger the grant we get, the more choices we're gonna have. So,
I would encourage everyone to take a look at the CDBGDR action plan draft, although they probably have more updated. And, you know, we are straight up the middle on all of the things that this document is talking about when they talk about what they are looking for.
yeah,
So all of the things about like ready and getting a consultant to get another consultant, all these things, I hate it. It feels very stupid to me, but like, whatever, I don't care, like, because what I really want to do is get the money.
yeah,
And this project is so completely and totally aligned with what is outlined in the action plan. I would be shocked if we did not get orgasm.
I don't want you to be shocked.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be shocked. But my skepticism is such with the government, I cannot believe in it until it's here.
Right.
I have heard consistently what you're saying, that we're right down the alley. I don't doubt that that's right. I gotta see the reality. We all do. Eli, do you have more or?
I just wanted to wrap up, so self-built or contractor, minimum lot size, those both feel important. Prefab home would go in that, like, self-built or contractor question. And then back to aesthetics and like density and impact, right? So more money from the block grant would mean less pressure to build as much as possible because of financial.
We would hope so.
You would hope so, right?
Arian, I believe, made the argument that the grants required a certain amount, or the more we could build would be a greater chance. So who knows if that's a given?
So, and my argument would be that, less pressure in what sense, right? So what I wrote down was building in the way that feels responsible, right? So when you're trying to decide how many units to build, how dense to make it, whether or not a 400 square foot home on a 2,000 square foot lot is okay, is what feels responsible. What is building responsibly? An amount of houses that meets the goals of this committee, right? First goal, rehouse those affected by the flood. Second goal, provide additional affordable housing amidst Vermont's housing crisis. That's what makes me choke up, right? So feels responsible as a committee and is respectful and is a responsible compromise with the people who live in it.
So we don't have a time frame, 'cause I don't think we do,
From
for when the housing might be available, but I don't know if these individuals have a time frame that they have set in their
That's an
mind.
excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah, and I think one thing just to kind of underline and emphasize what Eli said earlier on, and what I think is important to remember is like this conversation with prospective buyers, both like those that we have in this list that have stated that they're prospective buyers and, you know, the broader prospective buyers that are not present yet. Balancing like these design considerations about the number of houses and lots that can actually potentially fit on this land, looking at that in conjunction with what this prospective buyer group is looking for, and also Walker's tool of affordability of these lots depending on if we have more, if we have less, if there's a certain amount of this size. And so I think it is really important to realize that all three of those factors, and I'm sure many others, will need to be looked at in conjunction for us to be able to come to the kind of best proposal to then open up to the community and provide to the select board as a plan to move forward. So I think it's really important to remember that all three of those things are going to intersect and dictate where we go.
I would make sure that you let these people know that this is confidential, that only your group will have the information.
Yes.
And it'll be anonymized before we see it.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
I mean, I don't know, this might not be a good question, but I was just thinking about, because of parking and the way some of the parking is currently set up, like how many parking spots would they need for their household? Because we no longer, it's rare that a household of two people have one car, it's usually,
It'll inform the size of the lot, certainly.
yeah, so we have to consider like where to put those cars.
Right. Yeah,
I think that's really good because we struggle with not liking parking on this site plan. I remember that, and yet where do you park?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta
yeah,
account for
I
that.
think that's an excellent, I mean, you could
The
have,
zoning specifies that without a variance.
yeah, you could have elderly
Yeah.
seniors coming in, you could have
Yeah.
disabled folks, you know, and so what are, you know, what are their needs? Do they need the driveway right next to the house versus in a parking lot? That's definitely, and you
Right.
can't really ask them that question, but you can ask them, you know, what is their need? Would they want to have, you know, a driveway right next to their house or something more general to get at that point, but
So like considerations for accessibility,
yes.
I think
in
I think-
addition to like how many cars
Right.
like, would you need to be able to accommodate?
I think part of the new changes in the zoning was taking into account our ban on parking on the street. But they want to make sure every lot has somewhere that they can park that's off the street.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank
That's
you.
good.
Thanks, Eli.
Nice report, thank you.
Any other questions on this? I think we're just about, I'll ask if there's any public comment because we were on the wrong Zoom when we started this. And we generally ask at the beginning and the end. So is there any public comment from anybody tuning in on Zoom?
I just haven't, something I just wanna throw out there that had been discussed early on and as we're talking about buyers and like their options and stuff, and it had been thrown out, the idea of having like a kind of like a housing fair, but I'm thinking not just, you know, looking at all the aspects of the purchasing, like if we do wherever the revolving loan fund lives, having all the information on that, different types of financing, different types of builders. You know, what does it cost? Like maybe somebody who can run the numbers for somebody who doesn't know if they can even do it, so that they can be like, well, I want this house, but then when in reality, they can afford this house, like just something to help them with that process. Yes, Josh?
Yeah.
We should also reach out to the Vermont Housing Finance Authority.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would absolutely, some of the next things that we want to do are compiling a list of resources and building a set of pathways towards construction, right? Like laying out how people get there and giving them all the resources that they need. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure of it, but it was like
No, yeah. Please.
burning up my brain.
I think that's really good because I think people have this idea of what they want and
Oh, yeah.
connecting that with what they can afford can quickly get them to the spot they need to
Confuses me
be.
all the time what I want.
I just got married. Come on. Janice, I think, is the only public on there. Did you have anything to say, Janice?
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi, thanks. Well, I tuned in rather late, unfortunately, but I'd been hearing some murmurs about increasing density and building on wetlands, and I read the minutes from the last meeting, and I was definitely rather concerned, and I do, on the record, I thought that 40 units was way too many for that land and for the neighborhood, and I'm counting 56 on this map. I don't know what else you were talking about, but it seems extraordinarily unsustainable to me, both ecologically and in terms of what the community can handle. So I just need that put on the record, but you know that already, I think. So that's all I got to say. Thanks for all your hard work.
Appreciate it.
And I do have a statement as well at the last meeting, Kim made the statement that the community had decided on the density of this. And having spoken to a number of people that were at the design meeting, that I don't feel like that's true. I feel like there had to be guardrails. I understand that that's always the case. But I think they were guided to the solution they came to, not that they were free to say, no, I want 5 houses there. They were more guided to say, we need to cram as much on there as we can, or put as much on there as we're comfortable with, that kind of thing. So I really don't feel like, I realize it was all a compromise in the end, but saying that the community decided this amount, I don't think is accurate.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that that's probably a good statement, because I think I had read somewhere, and someone can correct me, but in the previous group, there was something like 60 people involved in those sessions to
Yes.
come up with this. And I think one thing we said as a committee here, that when we get to some proposals, we would bring it to the public to get
Yes,
their
we
viewpoint,
do
and they
that.
would help
Yes.
us with deciding
Yes,
what that
exactly.
density would be. That's
I'm-
my
I'm
understanding.
very glad to hear that. I mean, I concur with John. I was here and I discussed this with people at different points, I think in town meeting, that a lot of us understood that we were being charged to put 37 units on each of the tables, and that was the assignment, it was more of a matter of where rather than if. That said, I think that I hear Josh's argument about density. I know that,
Absolutely.
I really want people, the more I, get involved and see people who want the housing, the more I feel passionate about them having the opportunity to have it. But just as though aesthetics is a large issue, I don't think we've ever, we hear plan development. I don't think we have had, as a town, have had a conversation about how much is too much and how much is enough. And do we want to turn into a suburbia? Do we want to stay a small town? There are lots of conversations that I'm very glad that we.
Yeah, I didn't move to Plainfield to live in Chittenden County. I mean, that's.
All I can say is that how many lots go on there is a variable question at this point that we are not prepared to answer.
Right, and I don't.
And I think if we heard all of today's meeting, we heard a lot of reasons, pro and con,
Right.
for more or less houses, all legitimate reasons. And it's also dependent on what size, as I said, what size the community block grant comes in, a million variables that we just don't have the answers to at this point.
Just think that even once we get a lot of the variables, there really needs to be because we're at a very different point than we were as a community. This project is when the original planning charrette was done. This is going forward. I think we really want to make sure that whatever we end up with is a community decision. And there, we consider it unintended consequences. I just say this as somebody who's been here since the early 70s and loves this town a lot. You don't have to share my values, but and many people may not, and my values may not be the right ones, but whatever that means. But I just hope that we have a process so afterwards we're not going, oh crap.
Let's hope not. Any other public comment? Any other comments, private or public? In that case, if we can have unanimous consent to adjourn. With no objection, our next meeting, folks, is June 26th. Same stage.
Same place.
Thank you, Johnny. So we're,